For
Yeah.
it to be effective, my desire and my intention had to be aligned to what God had shown me in his heart.
Yeah.
And that's what I released. It wasn't like, oh, I want to do this and I'm going to go. It was like, no, I'm responding from what God has revealed. And I know that my intentions and my desires are now coming from his desire for me. And
Yeah.
that's really what gave me the peace to do it. Because I wouldn't have done it without God's intervention.
No.
I wouldn't have done it because I just wasn't in that place to do it or even think I wanted to do it, but
Yeah.
God had to get in there. And I think by saying I was selfish, I think he really challenged me because I felt, well, aggrieved. But how could you possibly say I'm being selfish for just being happy to be on my own? So it was almost the shock of it to say, oh, and then it was like, what do you mean? Then it was like, oh, I guess I am. I guess my thinking isn't right here. Probably because I was still hurt and still overcoming the emotional
Mm.
feelings of, what I'd gone through, and so God had to come into that because I didn't want to otherwise I could have got into a pity party and got into, oh, poor me, and I suppose I'll just be on my own, and actually, and you could, because you can get into that, but
Yeah.
God broke in before I got to that point. And I know a lot of people say, well, that was really quick, but it wasn't. It was a year, over a year after, you know, my, ex-wife told me she didn't want to be married anymore. And after she'd left, I wouldn't have even dreamt of doing anything while, there was still a possibility of restoration taking place. But no, she'd left. And I know God had basically told me this was not going to be restored. So then it was like, okay, I'm now on my own. So, you know, and we were legally separated. Now, some people think, well, what, you should have waited until you were divorced. And it was like, well, God didn't wait to tell me. He basically said to me, well, I don't consider you married anyway. You're not what I consider marriage, and what you had wasn't what I consider marriage at the end. So actually, see yourself the way I see you. Having a piece of paper is not what it's about. So then I had to really look at, well, what is marriage? And ask God to show me whether my views of what marriage was, and how, in terms of Christian marriage, legal marriage, what's God see as marriage from his perspective. And he had to change my thinking, quite seriously change my thinking over that whole issue to free me even to actually release a frequency in the first place. And it brought me to a place where, genuinely, I thought, okay, I can hopefully make someone happy and love them. And obviously they could love me. But also then it also brought me to think, and also I want my ex-wife to also find love and to find the person who can make her happy. Because if I can't make her happy, then it's better that she has a relationship with someone who can make her happy. Now, that wasn't how I felt when she first told me. It was like I was hurt and I was, in pain, and it was sort of a loss, and grieving started to take place, and all those emotions of sometimes you feel angry and sometimes you feel betrayed and all of those emotional things. And at that point, you just, I hadn't given up on possibility of restoration. But once God sort of really told me that actually, no, this is over and you need to let it go, then when God told me about a new relationship, I could then not think I didn't want my ex-wife to have a relationship and to find love and to find something for her. Because to be honest, she had the courage to actually end our relationship, because I wouldn't have done. I would have just stayed in it, no matter how unhappy we might have been at a level. I was very
Stick
happy
with
with my
you.
relationship with God, and I had an intimacy, and I was finding my needs in God were so strongly met that the lack of things I had in that relationship, I'd sort of, okay, I just compensated with God. God had sort of overcome my lack of stuff in that relationship. So I hadn't really got to that point of like facing the fact that this wasn't really the relationship that God really had intended for me and for her. And so it was then at that point, it was then that the door opened for then God to move me through into something. And then it was like, well, I can't hold stuff against her. You know, I need to bless her and want her to find the best. So, you know, it sort of is a process you have to work through. It's not that I just gave up on it and it was like the first sign of trouble. It was like, oh, that's it, great, I'm just going to not bother anymore. I really wanted restoration and I really wanted it to work out. And in those few months where I really tried, you know, and went through all those emotions and everything else, I wanted, you know, and I tried, you know, but it wasn't going to happen. And so I came around to the fact that, okay, it's not going to happen. And then it was like, God really, I think, affirmed to me, it's not going to happen. Therefore, you've got to let it go. And you've got to stop being obstructive. Because I was being obstructive. I wasn't making it easy. I wasn't going to give in to divorce, and I wasn't going to give in to separation. I wasn't going to I was like making it hard because I didn't want to let go of it. And then until God sort of said, let go of it, then it was like, okay, what does that now mean? I now have to be open to separation and I legally do it and do everything I need and then tie up all the things. What does that mean financially? What does it mean? You know, it's not an easy thing. You've got to go through it and work through it all. And there were times when I didn't find it very easy. And there were times when I was miserable and there were times when I was upset and there were times when I was angry and there were emotions involved. But they didn't last that long because I processed them, took them to God and say, well, you know, what should I be feeling? And he says, there isn't a should with feelings. It's what you are feeling. You know, you shouldn't have okay, well, this is what you should be feeling. You feel what you feel. It's how you handle the feelings that you have are the issue.
Yeah.
It's because you can't say, oh, you shouldn't feel like that. Well, I do. It's pointless saying to someone you shouldn't feel that way, but
Oh
you
God.
shouldn't let the emotions rule you and control you. You have to process your feelings, and I process them by taking it back to God. You know, and taking it back to him and saying, this is how I'm feeling. You know, and what he said was, that's okay. But don't get stuck there.
Yeah.
So he brought a measure of healing and he began to restore and make me whole in those areas where I was feeling hurt and pain and rejection and all the other things you feel when you go through a breakup of a relationship. You know, it was a genuine, emotional, difficult time, but God was with me all the way through it because I kept going to him with the emotions I was feeling. I'm feeling sad. You know, I'm feeling grief. I'm feeling loss. You know, but he is there to help carry our griefs and sorrows if we allow him to. So I didn't allow the emotions to so weigh me down that I got bogged down in it all. I kept trying to process it. You know, and my daughter, who was at home, she helped me as well, because if I was out of order, she would tell me, you know, so she would like, no, you're out of order, Dad. You know, I'm like, no, I'm not. It's like, you are. And I learned to actually realize that she could see when I was operating out of those emotions inappropriately. So she helped me come to terms with it, which was good because having someone else to talk to is also good. No, God can help, but sometimes just vocalizing it with someone else just helps you get it off your chest and bring it out. And it did, and that's what happened. you know. So it was, you know, it was a tumultuous turmoil of a time,
I'm
but
sure,
God
yeah.
was with me all the way through it, and he helped me to process and navigate through the emotional swamp, you know, and find a way out, you know, but not denying my emotions, but also not allowing my emotions to control me in a negative way. And therefore, you know, I think whenever someone's going through something, we need to help them understand that it's okay to have an emotional response to a negative situation. Just don't let it, you know, derail your future and keep you stuck in living in the past. So forgiveness and releasing, you know, people, you know, I had to do a lot of that because it felt, well, this isn't fair. I don't deserve this, you know. And actually, you know, there's always two sides to a story. You know, as much as what I felt, you know, I had to honor and respect the feelings that my ex-wife felt. And she was unhappy and I wasn't able to meet the needs that she felt she had. And it was like, okay, you know, how can I, which is what I wanted to do. How can I? Can I? And God was like, no, you can't, because it just isn't going to work, you know. And now I know that wasn't about the fact that I couldn't because of who I am. It wasn't, it was just our relationship was damaged to a degree that it wasn't going to work in that thing. Now I know God can restore anything, but actually sometimes I look and say, okay, God, did you ever intend this? And then it's like, oh no, that's not a question we should ask, because we're then looking at, okay, has my life been, you know, completely out of sync? Well, no, because God works within our choices, you know. And I felt in the beginning this was someone I could love, you know. Now I was immature in it all, and we were both immature in it all and everything else. So it wasn't that there wasn't really possibility, but sometimes things happen and things get, you know, mixed into it all, that just made it that this wasn't going to be restored, and I had to accept that. And once I did, then the healing process could start. And then
Yeah.
I could choose to honestly forgive and want to bless, you know. But you know, it's a difficult for anybody who's going through that type of breakup or that type of thing that happens in life. You know, it's not easy. And the worst thing that can happen is people around them, you know, condemning them and whatever. And people didn't. You know, it was people, because I didn't know what people would feel, and I had to be honest and tell people. You know, eventually, you know, I respected the fact that, you know, until my wife left, that I didn't want to in any way cause problems for her. So I didn't do anything other than our sort of close friends knew. But as soon as she left, it was like, no, I need to be honest about the situation. I need to tell people, and I just need to be real about the process that we'd gone through. And it actually, as soon as I told people and told all the groups that I was involved with, that was hard. You know, I spent a whole month telling all the groups, because it takes a month to get over all the groups, and repeating the same story over and over again and telling people was just like, oh, I just want this month to end, you know, because it was like, oh, how many more times can you tell the same thing? But people were genuinely supportive and encouraging, and there was no condemnation. And I'm really thankful and grateful for people in that. And even the friends that we had, they stayed neutral. You know what I mean? They didn't favor one side or the other. They didn't take sides. You know, they didn't sort of cut me off because, you know, they were my ex-wife's friends. You know, you know, they made it good. And I, again, thankful and appreciative of that, because they could have made it really difficult, you know, and others could have made it really difficult, but they didn't, you know. And I feel that was so positive, in the, because you never know how people are going to react, you know, but people reacted really well, and I'm grateful for that, you know, and appreciate that a lot, because that set the thing then for going forward, you
Yeah.
know. without carrying all the, you know, if that I'd received a lot of condemnation from people, and it would have been heavy, you know, but I didn't. You know, I felt genuinely, people felt people's love and felt people's care in it, which was really good, you know, and it helped me a lot. But sometimes, yeah, sometimes the subject comes up and it will potentially help other people, and that's
Sure.
really why I'm open to share things. You know, I'm not here to
Yeah.
hide things, but I know, you know, I don't want to share them, you know, out of any wrong motive. But when it comes up, you feel, okay, you know, there's an opportunity of, you know, positively helping to see that it's not the end, that
Yeah.
it's got something for all of us beyond the hurt and pain of broken relationships and different situations, that God is in the restoring process, that he can still restore us, even if a relationship is not restorable. We're restorable, and therefore he can bring us into a place where we're healed and whole, and can discover things that we never really knew before, you know.
Yeah, the
And
important thing. Yeah.
that's what really helped. You know, it helped that actually I'm not what people or might have said I am. You know, actually that area may have been suppressed in my life, but actually it's not dead. It is awakened, and now I can find what I'm really like, you know, which, you know, is different, you know, from what I would have imagined. It's beyond what I could have imagined or thought,
Mm.
you know,
Mm.
which is awesome. And God is beyond what we can imagine and think. He's better
Yeah.
than I could possibly think he is. And he always will go beyond any even limitations that I could think. There is no limitation with him. He's just always good and a God of love. So I appreciate that greatly. If you enjoy these videos, would you please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe? It really does help. Thank you very much.